So, is academia actually a competition where it is what's called a zero sum game? When you take some resources from somebody else, then that means that other person doesn't get the resources that you currently possess. I want to talk about that today. I think it's a really important topic that we view, or the sort of traditional view with academia, is that it is some sort of form of competition or a zero sum game where everybody is taking resources from everybody else. But I want to convince you and change your mind to sort of think about this in a completely different way. So if you don't know me, I am Professor Dave Masek. I'm Associate Professor of Innovation Strategy and Entrepreneurship. And I created this whole reciprocity project to give back. There's so many people that help me out that I want to pay the favor for to help you out. Check out the reciprocity platform, by the way. Okay, so is academia actually a zero-sum game? Is it a competition where you're stealing resources from somebody else? So in the near term, that's definitely what's happening, right? There's only a given amount of resources in every single year that goes around for everybody, right? So university budgets are set, and then you have to compete within those university budgets for a limited amount of resources. Now, this might be the same thing for this might be the same thing for grants, right? There's only so much grant money to go around, and so you're competing with everybody else in terms of the resources that are there for those grants. However, I want to sort of change your mind and sort of think about this in an abundance mindset. And the problem is that you have to sort of view this in a completely different way. And the dynamic is not within the single snapshot, not within the single period. And the dynamic of what you're focusing on is very long term. And what you're looking at is 5, 10, 15, 20 years that plays out completely differently in terms of thinking of this. Now, this is the same way that I would think about investing in financial matters, for example. I don't think about any given year. I'm actually probably performing really spectacularly poorly this year. It's 2022. The financial markets have been terrible. And if I think about that single year, I'm going to feel really desperate. I'm going to feel really bad in terms of what's actually happening. However, if my mindset is that this is a 20, 30, 40 year endeavor, things change all of a sudden. And what happens, what's going on there is you have compound interest and accumulating resources. So every year what's happens is that you are gaining a percentage more in terms of the resources that you have available. Now, some years it's stochastic or probabilistic. So some years it sort of goes up, some years it goes down, but in general it goes up by 10%. Now, it's the same thing that's happening with you in terms of the competition or the gameplay that you're happening within academia, is that it slowly goes up every single year as you make investments in yourself and make investments in other people. What happens is that there is a slow growth that happens. And what's happening is that this year, like say you give that 10% number, right? So for yourself, you're growing at a 10% rate. Well, it doesn't seem like much, but over the course of 7 years, the sort of potential that you have doubles. And that's kind of normal. That's called the rule of 7 that you'd experience in stock markets. And it's the same thing that you would happen. In fact, I would say that the growth of human potential is actually probably a little bit bigger than that, and it's a little bit faster than that. But it takes a long time. You can imagine that is 7 years. So if you look back and you think about, okay, 7 years, what does that feel like in those 7 years? It feels absolutely terrible. In those 7 years, you feel like you're really behind. You feel like you're not getting anywhere. You feel like all sorts of different things that is going to play out. And then on top of it, you also have people that are breathing down your neck and sort of saying that you're not performing, but in fact, you're doing the things that you should be doing, right? And so how do you actually accumulate more resources every year? Well, it's pretty simple, right? You invest in yourself by continuing to sort of read and do research and all of those kind of things, but then you also invest in other people and you do things that sort of grow the pie a little bit more, right? And all these efforts take a long time, but they compound very If you look at it in the long run, you look back, generally it compounds really quickly, right? Like it's a process that happens pretty quickly. But when you're in the moment, when you're in the day to day, and you're experiencing, this day to the next day to the next day, it doesn't really change that much. And so if you view the academic game, you view everything that we do in terms of a long-term perspective, you're going to realize that actually there's a lot of abundance that's there, and that there is a tremendous amount of potential that everybody is experiencing, but it just takes a long time. Now, the problem is, the challenge that we all face is that we're all sort of focused in the short term, when we're looking at the immediate resources that we have at our fingertips, and we think like, I don't have enough, or I can't do this. But instead of focusing and having that sort of mindset on what's happening today and what's going on today, I want you to sort of change and think about, how can I invest in myself and invest in other people around me so that I could be someplace in 10 years, or I can do something in 10 years that is going to be really spectacular, that was not possible if I focused on where I was today. And I know that that is a challenging thing to think about, and most of us are very short-sighted, and we can't think about that. And a lot of times we might be experiencing things that are outside of our control, where people are sort of removing resources from you because they don't believe in it. Well, then you still have to have that mindset and focus on how you actually get there, one step at a time, doing the long, slow grind towards it, and forgetting about the immediate short term. So if you do that, right, it's like my own investments that I have. It's doing terrible this year, right? It's terrible. But I know if I keep pushing at this, and I keep trying, and I keep doing it, good things are going to happen. And maybe that's delusional, but I do see that there's a general pattern where that happens across many people that stick with the academic game. And that's where I want you to think about, is that it's not a zero-sum game. You don't have to act aggressively. And this, if you think of it in this kind of way, you actually change how you view people, you change a lot of things. It doesn't mean that other people are not going to view it as a zero-sum game, and it doesn't mean that they're not going to be competitive and nasty to you, but you don't have to do the same thing back to them. And you can view it as long-term investments where you're actually helping other people out. And if you have that mindset, and you think of this as kind of a growth journey or a learning journey, or you're continuously expanding and you're helping out in many different ways, you're going to act differently and do things a lot differently than what happens around you. Now, it doesn't mean to be a doormat. That's not what I'm saying. Like, if somebody's being aggressive or competitive and all that kind of stuff to you, then you just cut them off, right? Like, it's not worth your time and effort. But if you extend yourself and you're helpful and people are helpful back, well, just remember that, right? Like, that's how it works. Because what ends up happening, just like every other career, everything that you do, you end up coming back to the same people in 10 years, right? And those 10 years, you're going to bump into them. And you're going to see the same people. And if you're kind and generous and all that kind of stuff for many, many years, then people view you differently. They have different sort of views on what happens. You're trustworthy, all those kind of things. And that's where the abundance actually comes in, and you don't have to take from anybody. You can actually help other people out. That's all I want to say, is that it's not really a zero-sum game. I think that sort of academia as competition is nonsense. And anybody that sort of views and sort of manages in that way is completely off the mark. It's very much just sort of growth mindset, and figuring out how to have more abundance is better. And in the long run, that almost always wins. All right, take care and have a wonderful day. Bye.